Hello and welcome to Brain Says Strange Things. I'm Patrick and this is my brother Jordan. We're here once again to talk to you about horror movies. This episode is one that we're really excited about. We are going to be tackling two of the major franchises in all of horror film history. The Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and Friday the 13th. We have long been huge fans of both of these series of films, as I'm sure many horror fans are. And we rewatched... It's
almost required to do this.
Yeah, we knew at one point we would have to tackle Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street somehow in some way during this podcast. So we decided to just do a big episode, talk about all of the movies in each franchise together in a kind of compare and contrast. So we're not really going to have a debate in the way that we did with Universal Studios versus Hammer, but we are going to compare and contrast the two franchises, and we've come up with a way to do that. We devised various categories, like Best Final Girl, Best Kill, Best Initial Entry.
Kind of like an award show for the two
franchises. So we're going to kind of pit each series head to head and select our favorite moments amongst these various categories. Did that make sense?
I think so.
I think it'll make sense as we
I think so, but I've been thinking about it for a few weeks now, so
yeah,
who knows?
Yeah. So we have just been watching a lot of these movies, rewatching in preparation for this episode. So
I gotta say, in full disclosure, I didn't go back and rewatch every single one. I've seen every single one, but for this, I didn't go back and watch every single one.
You watched the bulk of them, though, or a
yeah,
lot?
I watched the majority of both of them again,
and we've both seen them all multiple times. I did watch all of them, and this is 20 films altogether that we're really going to be talking about here. But I think the way we've structured this will make it hopefully somewhat manageable and not overwhelming.
We'll see.
So I guess we'll get started and go through our various categories and see how the movies stack up.
Well, and also we made these lists of these categories, and we don't know each other's answers either, so this should be interesting.
That's a good point, yes. So we came up with this list of categories together, but we do not know what each of us selected.
I suspect they'll probably match up.
We'll see. All right, well, without any further rambling ado, let's jump into our list and see what kind of discussion this generates. So our first category is kind of an obvious one. So amongst all of the movies, the two franchises, who do you think was the best final girl? And I'm sure we don't have to explain the concept of the final girl to anyone watching this podcast. Why don't you give your answer first? We'll kind of alternate.
Okay. Final Girl is a huge category.
Yes.
So there's one in every movie, so you're going to have to make a choice. And as much as I'd like to kind of pick an obscure one, I got to go with Nancy.
Yep.
She's so memorable, and she's so atypical of the kind of, even physically, like the person you would think.
Yep.
That they would cast in that role. She is a girl next door. She's like the epitome of that. And I don't know, she's kind of a more heroic version of Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes.
Who's like the original Scream Queen. And Nancy's performance is really good in that movie. It holds it together really well.
For sure, yeah. Played by Heather Langenkamp. So Nancy is also my choice as best final girl in all of these films. And honestly, one of the best final girls in horror film history. And rewatching the movie, I kind of assumed I would choose her going in, so I really paid attention to her performance, particularly in the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. And you're right, she really does kind of stand out from the pack. She's not just a victim who becomes the final girl merely by the fact that she's the last one left.
Yes.
She really kind of takes her destiny in her own hands. And it's a terrific performance by Heather Langenkamp. But she's very pretty. But you're right, there's something a little atypical about her looks and certainly about her performance, especially by the end of the movie of A Nightmare on Elm Street, when she's been deprived of sleep. Her friends are dead.
She's also deprived of dialogue, which really it works for her as well. She doesn't talk a lot at the end of the movie. It's a lot of chasing around and a lot through the performance.
Yep.
Kind of skipping ahead a little off topic is part of that. What hammers at home is we just watched the remake of it. with Rooney Mara as playing Nancy, and it didn't work.
Something was missing.
Something was off with that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the remakes later, but that's just another way that you can kind of tell, like, well, there was something about that particular actress. It wasn't about, I mean, it's a really good story, but it would kind of would be a toss-up if it was anybody else. You have no idea if it would have been good or if it would have been bad.
And by the way, we're not going to bother summarizing what A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th are about if you don't know.
We kind of will, actually, with one of the categories.
Yeah, but we're assuming people know who Freddy and Jason are. So yeah, Nancy, terrific. And not only was she a great final girl in A Nightmare on Elm Street, but she returned for 2 sequels. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors, which I will definitely be talking about in a little bit more depth, and the very interesting kind of postmodern film Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Kind of a herself, like a, I don't know what I want to say. It's like before Scream.
Oh yes,
it's kind of his like attempt at Scream before Scream came out.
And we'll talk about that film later. But Nancy was absolutely, Heather Langenkamp was terrific as Nancy in those
so we got
movies.
One.
So she is our best final girl. So we're in agreement there so far. It's going to be interesting to see how much our answers line up on
that's
this.
one.
All right, Jordan, what is our second category?
Oh, I didn't memorize them. All right, what did we pick as the second one? The second one is the best look.
Okay.
Overall, and we're not talking about like the look of the actual film as a whole. Talking about the characters.
Yes, Freddy.
Right? I hope I interpreted that right.
Freddy and Jason, who had the best look in each of these movies. So I'll go ahead and give my answer first.
Okay, yeah. We'll just switch off like that, so go ahead.
I originally was going to choose Freddy because I just feel like it's such an innovative design, such an iconic and creative look. But ultimately, as I was watching the Friday the 13th series, I really enjoyed the way in which Jason appeared slightly different in each film. Freddy pretty much looks the same in all of the movies, but every person who was involved in making the Friday the 13th movies had a different kind of spin on the look of Jason Voorhees, and part of that was because the character himself transformed throughout the series, and part of it was just
well, they're kind of making up as they go along, and you can kind of tell that.
Yeah, so I actually went with a very specific answer to this question, and I chose not just Jason, but specifically Jason as he appears in Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. And this will not be the last time you hear me mention Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, in this episode, because I really enjoyed watching that movie. So I love the way Jason looks in that movie. He has a hugely swollen head, wispy, scraggly hair. The hockey mask.
Interesting too, though, is that he barely appears in that movie.
Yeah, it is interesting that he doesn't appear a lot, which might be why a lot of people maybe don't like that movie as much.
So, like, maybe even like the small doses approach worked for
maybe, but I just think he looks terrific. It is, of course, Kane Hodder, everyone's favorite Jason, playing the role in that movie. Just a big, hulking, really terrific-looking Jason Voorhees. So, Jason in Jason Goes to Hell is my pick as best look for the killer in these movies. How about you?
I didn't get that specific. I guess I probably could, thinking about it now, but it's funny that you said, like, initially you're thinking Freddy. And I have, like, written here, I had started writing an F for Freddy, and then I changed it to Jason.
They're both great.
Part of it is that I feel like the Freddy character is almost, they want you to think that. They want you to remember what he looks like. So he has all of these different things. He has the claws, he has a hat, he has the...
It's very unique.
He has a sweater.
And iconic. And it was that way from the beginning.
Yep.
Whereas Jason kind of stumbled across this
Jason
look.
didn't even have a hockey mask for like 2 movies. He kind of evolved. I just like how it's so simple, Jason.
Well, that's a lot of the appeal of Jason. It's very basic.
He is a very simple guy.
Not a complex
in more ways
fellow.
than one. I don't know. There's something really iconic where you can sum up the character with one. You show a hockey mask, and people know who you're talking about. Well, you show people the claws, 90% of them are gonna get that's Freddy. But it's not like a home run there. So I picked Jason. This is gonna be boring. We're agreeing.
Well,
so,
we'll see. I'm curious how much we're gonna line up. Maybe we will a lot. And yeah, it's cool that Freddy. I mean, Robert Englund came up with the idea for these claws and the glove, but the hockey mask was just an ordinary object that nobody would have ever associated with horror until it was adopted by Jason. And
it's never really written in very well. It's just there.
It's just there. And now you can never see that old style hockey mask. You think Jason Voorhees.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, for sure. I also had, and I do realize we're only on question 2, so we'll get going here. But I actually had a runner-up for this category as well.
We need, like, the music to play you off.
Yeah, I know. I would have been a hook at this point. But I did have a runner-up for this category, which is another look for Jason.
How can you have another look or another runner-up if you have a choice between 2 people?
I know, but see, I consider each of the Jasons.
I picked Jason, the runner-up is
So I took Jason in Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Was also a great look.
Okay. That's one that I didn't revisit.
Oh, he looks good in that movie. And I enjoyed that movie on the whole more than I thought I would, too.
Isn't that the one where his mask actually comes off and they show?
Yeah, they show him in a few more of the movies than you remember. But he has... it's the second movie with, like, zombie Jason, right? So he's resurrected from the dead in Part 6... And then this is the second movie where he comes up out of the lake with the psychic girl. So he's kind of got a modified zombie look. On his back, you can kind of see his spinal column kind of through his clothes. You can see part of his like skeleton skull underneath the hockey mask where it's chipped away. He's got a cool like chain around his neck from the previous film.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just an overall really solid look. So anyway, that's my runner-up. So. Jason.
No, it's good. I almost kind of wish I would have gotten more specific.
Yeah, well, it just occurred to me as I was watching the movies. I was like,
I liked him as the worm in Jason Goes to Hell.
Well, that was definitely an interesting look. All right, well, let's move on to a related category, which we kind of covered, so we probably won't have to spend too much time on this, and that is best weapon. So, Jordan, why don't you pick for the best weapon in the series, because they use all kinds of weapons.
I don't want you to think like this is undercutting my last answer, but I picked his claws.
Okay.
Freddy's claws.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say I picked that too.
Almost for the opposite reason, though. Yeah. It's like I feel like I'm going back on what I said and backpedaling, but you've never seen those before in a movie.
Yep, and that was kind of my thinking.
I don't think people even knew what they were.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, he's got knives on his hands. That's a cool look. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, that's an actual thing. Like people did actually use those.
They did.
Yes, like pruning shears. Like those are an actual thing.
Oh,
so that kind of,
I didn't
see
know
that like hits you later.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
That's what he didn't like make them. He just like found this device. Yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't make something as stupid as that.
Well, then it's again kind of on the level of the hockey mask. It's an ordinary object that has now become forever associated with.
And also the machete has been adopted by other people as well. Whereas if someone put on those gloves, you'd think they're just copying Freddy. So it's something very uniquely his, and that was what I picked.
I really don't have anything to add. I couldn't have said it better myself. So I'm going to go with that too. All right, so our next category is best music. Now, when I filled out my answer for this category,
this is kind of a confusing category.
I couldn't really remember what our intention was with this. Did we mean the best score? Did we mean the best song? Did we mean which has the best theme music?
I kind of took it as like best musical moment, whatever
that
means.
That's good, because I cheated this one a little bit, and I did interpret it in exactly that way and chose the best musical moment, which is also one of my favorite moments, not even in all of horror movies, but in all of cinema history. And it is when they blend the Nightmare on Elm Street theme into the Friday the 13th theme at the very beginning of the cinematic masterpiece, Freddy vs. Jason. It just made my little heart swell. And actually, when I recently rewatched the movie with someone, we were kind of chatting as the movie started playing, and I had to shush him because I had to hear the Freddy theme blending into the.
I forgot it did that, and it didn't.
Awesome.
I just watched it recently. That didn't actually make an impression on me, but I do remember that. You're right.
Awesome.
That's good. For me, I guess I kind of interpreted it a little differently. I picked Freddy's Little Rhyme.
Yeah, well,
which
for sure.
which carries through most of his movies.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
Yeah,
yes,
it's great. It's so urban myth like.
Yes,
that it's perfect.
Yes, like it's really amazing. All of the elements that just work so well that were in that original Nightmare on Elm Street film.
And also Jason's theme, that Chi-Chi.
Yeah, how did they come up with that? Is what I want to know. That
there actually is a story behind that, I think.
Enlighten us.
You don't know? I said I think. No, I don't remember exactly.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, I could like say what I thought it was, but I'll probably be wrong.
All right.
It's something like it ends with ma ma ma. So it's like it has something to do with Jason's mother being the killer. They wanted to reveal that it was the mother in the music without actually saying it. There's some other part to it that I don't remember. Whatever. I'm probably wrong about that, but there was an original story behind that. So I didn't pick it, so who cares?
Yeah. But I mean, it's not even really music. It's more of like a sound effect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think your choice of the rhyme in Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, of course, that's one of the everybody remembers. Everybody loves that element of the movies. That rhymes.
It's a nice little layer that they add to the urban myth part of it.
Yep, absolutely, and there's a lot of that. So cool. All right, so we've chose something different for once. Okay, so our next one is also a music-related category, and we wanted to choose our best/worst metal song played over closing credits.
I don't have a lot to say about this, so let's just kind of cruise.
Right. I mean, if you've seen a lot of 1980s horror movies, you know that a lot of them just have horrible metal songs played over the credits that, like, horribly awesome. So let's see. Did I give my answer first last time? I think
it's you.
No, I think it's you. Want to give your answer?
Okay, whatever. I picked The Man in the Mask.
The Man in the Mask
by Alice Cooper, who I like. I like Alice Cooper.
Now, which one is that in? Do you remember?
Jason Lives.
Okay, what a great movie.
Jason Lives.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one later. I mean, you have ones that you revisited and really liked. And I have ones that I do, and that's the perfect example of it. But yeah, I guess you picked it.
Well,
right? I couldn't think of what. I know there was one.
Well, the Man in the Mask is the one that I had in mind when I came up with this category, and there actually weren't as many as I remembered. I think I was thinking of like 80s movies in general. And these series aren't. I
remember it as a category because each one has one of those moments, but I could not for the life of me remember the Freddy one.
Well, I actually had a different answer for this one. And I chose, and I looked up the name of the song in the band.
The Fibonacci's.
No, yeah, right. It's our Terrorvision episode. No, it was a song called Nightmare by a band called 213 or 213 that plays at the end of the very first Nightmare on Elm Street, which is such a good, elegant, nicely done movie. And it has this
the end of which one?
Of the very first Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay.
It's just the silliest metal song. Okay. Although I know it has its fans, so but yeah, it's just got this silly refrain where they go, "It's a dream, dream. No, it's a nightmare. It's a dream, dream."
That's awesome.
It's really awesomely, horribly, amazingly, badly good. Okay. So that's what I chose. All right, so that was a fun category. Ooh, as is our next category. Now, I know we collaborated on this, but I know you came up with the best sex scene / nudity. I actually had trouble with this one. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful women in various states of undress in all of these movies.
But it's not like, it's kind of best use of a sex scene.
Best use of sex scene.
Sort of, okay. It's not like most attractive female,
right?
You know.
Well, so the one I chose
factors into it, I suppose.
The one I chose, and this will be my second mention of this great film, is the tent sex sequence from Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday.
Yes.
They kind of are equal opportunity nudity in this with the boy and the girl, which I appreciated for a change in these movies, and it was generally kind of sexy sex, and also it ends with a great kill mid-coitus. So I like that scene overall, so I chose the tent sex sequence in Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday.
Okay. Let me read my answer here. Jason Goes to Hell, tent.
Nice!
So, yeah, same thing. They were very fearless in that movie with what they showed.
Yeah, and well, especially if you watch it in sequence with the other movie, they dial it up for Jason Goes to Hell.
It really stands out, even from ones that follow it.
Yep.
It's, if you watch like the director's cut, there's a theatrical cut as well, which is way cut down.
Yeah.
But this...
I watched the director's cut.
Especially, so did I. Especially with the very climax of the scene where...
See what he did there?
Where the person is cut in half, essentially, with a pole.
Yep.
Like, no pun intended there either, but... And then it's like a real effect. They show everything, essentially, in this sex scene. Yes. And that's what you want. And
they do. They show everything in terms of nudity and...
and I can't even say that the girl is the most attractive girl in the whole series either, but that's kind of the perfect...
I think it's amazing
together,
that we chose the same scene in this category of all the like sex and nudity.
To be honest, that was the one I had in mind from the very beginning.
Really?
And I was thinking of other ones, but that one just always stayed there in the back of my head. And
you know, the one I thought I would choose actually was from Nightmare on Elm Street, the waterbed sequence where the girl from the poster comes and attacks Joey. For some reason, I remember as a kid, I always found that scene, something about it to be just
really sexy,
really
scene.
Erotic in a way. Yeah, really erotic in a way that other moments weren't. But yeah, the tent sequence really.
I think that sequence probably pops up again later in my my list here. But
yeah, so would you think it would be fair to say that someone may pitch a tent while watching the tent?
That's good too. See, lovely.
Moving on. Okay, where are we?
Whatever one's after this.
Category 7. Did we mention we have 20 categories? We're going to move it
just
up.
as many movies.
We're going to motor along here.
All right,
this one's kind of a fun kind of joke category. Probably not too much to say about this one. The best actor who went on to bigger and better things, because both of these franchises have smaller parts. Well, not really small parts, but early parts for actors who would go on to be mainstream entertainers.
And this is a hard category to decipher.
Yeah.
It's like, what does that actually mean?
Well, what is your pick?
Again, I feel like I kind of got to go with an obvious one, but this category almost feels like to me like show off what you know about these movies.
It's kind of a little trivia.
So I picked Johnny Depp.
Right on.
I think he's probably the one who went on to be in the best movies.
Yeah.
So, and he's featured pretty prominently.
He's a major character. Glenn in A Nightmare on Elm Street.
And he also has a really good death.
One of the most memorable deaths in the series.
And he's not very Johnny Depp-like in the movie.
Just a young kid. He does a great job in the movie.
Yeah, he plays a kid.
Yep.
And then, of course, there's others. Actually, one that came to mind that I almost put, I did kind of in parentheses, I put Rooney Mara. Just because she's proven herself to be a really great, interesting actress. Now, the reason I didn't pick her is because in the remake of Elm Street, which is what she's from, she's not that great.
That's actually a really good choice. Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that I didn't remember her from that movie. I mean, we'll talk about that when we talk about the remakes, but I mean, she's beautiful, but something just didn't stand out about her in that one. It wasn't,
but definitely an example of an actress who went on to bigger and better things. Yeah, I was definitely thinking of Johnny Depp and Kevin Bacon when I first came up with
Bacon's the other one that I thought of, but then I'm just kind of like...
Yeah. I just think it's...
People just remember his death.
I just think it's...
People don't remember his performance.
I just think it's funny that both entries in these franchises have, like, major, like, actors in them. It's kind of a weird coincidence.
Which one has more, you think?
Has more major actors?
Yeah, who have had more... Which franchise has launched more...
Oh, I don't know. I think they're mostly resume killers for the most part, with these, like, notable exceptions. Anyway, the one I actually chose was Corey Feldman. From the very young Corey Feldman. No, actually, I think he's a good choice. From
I think of
Friday the 13th 4, the final
He's
chapter.
in 2 of them, isn't he?
He appears in... he might be at the very beginning of the next one in new footage, but he mostly appears in like stock footage in like the next 2 sequels because they carry that character forward, but with an adult actor. So yeah, the young Corey Feldman appeared in Friday the 13th 4, what was intended to be the final chapter in the franchise. The little kid Corey Feldman actually killed Jason at the end of that movie.
Yeah, that's kind of weird where he shaves his head.
It's a really weird sequence. He plays like this little kid who's really into monsters and stuff. He makes like masks.
But that was so awesome. Did he really go on to bigger things?
Well, he didn't go on to as bigger things as Johnny Depp and
no,
but people know Corey Feldman, and so I think he did a great job in the movie. So, and that the character he played carried forward into the next two sequels, even though
Tommy
Feldman didn't. Tommy, yeah, those three are like the Tommy trilogy. So Corey Feldman was my choice as best actor, who went on to somewhat bigger things. All right. The next one is a fun category.
He went on.
He went on. The next category is kind of a fun one. The most annoying victim, or as we like to call it, the Had It Coming Award.
All right. Now, I bet we picked the same one in this one too, because I think when we came up with the categories, I think when we came up with the categories, we had a specific person in mind.
Yes,
which is why you
I
thought
think
of
you're probably right. Well, let me give my answer, because I went a different way with this than I originally thought I was going to. Because these movies, of course, are popular with a lot of obnoxious teenagers who you just want to see killed. They're just
I bet I know your answer.
Hold on, they're just annoying people. But there's another type in these movies too, which is the adult authority figure who is a hindrance to their stopping the bad guy.
You're right, and I wish I would have picked it.
Especially the Friday the 13th has a lot of these types of characters. In Jason X, there's the guy who wants to bring Jason back for pure profit. Mm-hmm. In Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, there's the guy who pushed his daughter, or I don't know if she's his daughter, into the lake, and he's a horrible authority figure. And I chose, for the most annoying victim, Had It Coming Award, the reprehensible Dr. Cruz from Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Do you remember Dr. Cruz?
I do.
What an asshole that guy was.
Yeah.
So Dr. Cruz...
He's kind of experimenting on his...
Yeah, Dr. Cruz plays a psychiatrist who's working with the girl in that film has some psychic telekinetic powers. The movie's kind of like Carrie versus Jason.
That one would, if we had the category, that one would fall into my wasted opportunity.
For sure. So. So Dr. Cruz, at first it seems like he's genuinely trying to help her, but in fact he's manipulating her for his own fame and profit. As the movie goes on, he just gets worse and worse. He tries to use the girl's mother as kind of a shield to protect himself against Jason, and finally meets his demise in the woods, and you couldn't be happier. This guy's a real creep. So Dr.
he
Cruz
gets killed with some weird wood chipper. Not a wood chipper.
It's,
a
branch.
Weed whacker.
A branch saw is what they called it when I looked it up online, actually.
Oh, okay.
So Dr. Cruz was my the person I was happiest to see die.
I totally forgot about him. Yeah, you're right.
So did you choose?
I went with the stock answer.
From Part 3.
Yeah, but
it's a good answer though.
A lot of it is because he's the character that he gets the mask
and
from.
We're speaking, of course, of Shelley in Friday the 13th Part 3.
Shelley, who's like the fat nerd, who obviously you want to die. Mm-hmm. So I kind of
really
feel like
annoying.
I fell for it.
He's really annoying.
But he's way too much of that.
Yeah.
He goes way over the top. His character is, I'm going to play practical jokes.
Yeah.
And that's what he does in the entire movie. And he gets a harpoon to the face. Yeah. And I felt that was very rewarding when he died. Yes. And I don't always feel like that, because it's like you're supposed to feel that way about annoying people. But Shelley, something about...
Sorry, Shelley.
There's something unspoken there. Something, I don't know. Something about the tone of his voice, or just his mere existence. I was happy to see
really
Shelley
goddamn irritating.
But he's the ultimate one.
As annoyed as we were with Shelley, and is happy to see him die at the hands of our friend Jason, he did make one incredibly important contribution to the franchise. He provided Jason's hockey mask for the first time, and really kind of completed the classic Jason look. So thanks for that, Shelley, but you had to go, buddy.
He served his purpose. So.
Yep. Okay, so let's see. We are moving on to category 9. There's a big category. You said this was kind of the equivalent of Best Picture.
Okay, what was this now?
So this, I actually don't have too much to say about this one, but an important category. The best kill. Mm-hmm. Jordan, why don't you let everyone know what you thought of all the deaths. I didn't do a tally of how many there were in all 20 of these films, but of all the many deaths, what do you think was the best kill?
This was a hard one for me, which is why I think it's a big category. All right, I could say my answer. I had a few runners up.
Okay. Well, say your answer, and then I'll do my answer, and then we can talk about runners up.
Okay, I'm gonna go with the original Nightmare on Elm Street, Tina. Who's killed on the bed.
Dave really likes that one.
Where they have the special effects are where they have her up on like wires. You don't see the wires. I mean, you can tell that she's on wires, but she's being cut up and thrown around in the dream world. But all you're seeing is her kind of fly around the room. And they do that technique where you keep the camera in one position, you rotate the room, so it looks like she's like sliding up the wall.
Yep.
A lot of really simple practical effects that really work in this movie.
Very memorable, iconic.
And it's another one where we watched the remake recently. They do the same scene almost, but it just does
with quote unquote better computer enhanced effects, and it just didn't have the impact of that original.
Didn't work. I mean, that is a frightening scene. I feel, and
very unnerving.
That's the one I picked, and then I also had a second. I mean, you can give yours, but
well, I really think you make a good case for that one, and I agree that is definitely one of the best, most memorable, just horror moments beyond just best kill. I chose, I think, kind of an obvious one, actually from the same film, the original Nightmare on Elm Street,
Johnny,
which is the Johnny Depp fountain of blood from the.
He's like the Kool-Aid Man.
It's so. I mean, I hope everyone has seen it and remembers this film, but essentially, Glenn falls asleep on his bed watching Miss Nude America, if I recall correctly, and he's absorbed into his bed. And a moment later, just a gusher, a geyser of, I don't know how much blood they used to film this scene, bursts up and onto his ceiling, and it's obviously like filmed upside down in reverse, and it just looks absolutely terrific. Not really scary or unnerving in the way that the kill you described was.
Right, there's different ways you can go, which also brings
an
me to my
iconic image, and also should probably be given credit for probably just the most like sheer gallons of blood used in any single kill. So the geyser of blood that was Johnny Depp as Glenn. Yes. I always wonder what the cops found when they went up there. That's always what I think about when I watch that movie. I'm like, what exactly are they seeing? So that was what were some of your runner-ups?
All right, so then I went another direction. I thought, like, what is the most... Because you could think of what is the most terrifying image that sticks with you, and then you could think of, like...
We should have done scariest moment.
You could think... I had, like, as a separate category written down that I should have mentioned is, like, most haunting moment.
All right, well, we can talk about other stuff, too, at the end.
But the other ones I picked were fun ones, and they were both from Jason movies. And one is from, I think it's The New Blood. You might have to correct me.
Okay.
Is where he takes the girl in the sleeping bag in the woods, and he beats her against a tree. I don't know. That is just so ridiculously Jason.
Yes.
He's in the woods, he's killing people, he's killing a female... in a sleeping bag, and he's like just beating it against a tree.
Yeah.
You don't see the actual human being dying, so it's less horrifying than if you have like a dummy. That's one that I picked.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
And then,
and not the only sleeping bag kill in the series.
Oh no, there's
a few
at
others.
least one other, but I'm sure there's more.
I can think of two others. The virtual reality simulation in Jason X, and the remake which we just watched where he strings her up to be roasted over the campfire in her sleeping bag.
That was good. The other one that I picked was from, I think this is the only time I'm going to mention Jason X.
Okay.
Is where he freezes the girl's head.
Oh, yes.
Cryogenic.
Yes, good one.
Solution, and he just smashes it against the table.
Yep, a good one.
So, there's not a lot to say about that one, but that's another one I thought. Both of those are kind of like fun deaths.
Sidebar,
like
I like Jason X.
Okay.
Good choices.
You'll probably mention it again, but okay.
Good choices. Okay, we are rocking right along here. Number 10, bring us to about the halfway point. Best sequel. So, you know, we had the great original films, which spawned many sequels. Personally, I excluded Freddy vs. Jason from this category, just because I didn't really know how to consider it. So
I think you'd have to exclude that and remakes.
Yeah,
they're both kind of their own.
Yeah, exactly. So putting those aside, the best sequel in all the franchises, I chose, and I'd really like to make a case for this as one of the best horror films of the 1980s, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors. Okay. I love this film, and it goes up in my estimation every time I watch it. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. They stumbled quite a bit with the first sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 2, which is definitely we'll talk about in an upcoming category. But Dream Warriors, Wes Craven was more directly involved in this one, back as a producer, co-writer. There are actually a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Frank Darabont worked on this movie, and Angelo Badalamenti did the music for this movie. But he really showed how to make a sequel to a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. He kind of took it to a larger mythic level, and honestly, it could have kind of been the last movie in the franchise. He really wrapped it up well. This is when Amanda Kruger, who we will discuss later, was introduced. Really added a lot to the mythology. Great story, brought Nancy back, the idea of the kids having the powers in their dreams. A lot of great characters. Sequences. Welcome to Primetime, Bitch is from this movie. Great film. So
that's where he rams her head and
Yep, into the TV.
That was good. God, there are a lot of good Freddy deaths, because I'm thinking of another one that I should have added to my...
Yeah, and also Dream Warriors is kind of when the deaths in that series started to become a little bit more creative and elaborate. If you watch the first Nightmare...
That's not the one with the Roach Motel, is it?
No, it isn't.
Okay. That's one that really always sticks with me.
They go too far with that kind of thing in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but if you watch like the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, he's a little bit darker character, a little bit more straightforward. This one, he starts to...
He gets like his personality.
Exactly, and he designs the children's deaths, the kids' deaths, the teens' deaths to kind of match up with their personality, and he becomes more like the Freddy Krueger that we know. So I absolutely love this movie.
Okay.
So what was your choice for best sequel? I have some runners-up I have one runner-up that I'll discuss.
Yeah, that one I don't know. I did watch that one recently actually too, but it didn't make the impression that it did with you. I guess.
I just love it. Sure. I just think it's great.
The one that I picked that I've talked to you about since I rewatched it is Jason Lives.
Yeah, you really like that one. I feel like that is kind of your Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 for you, which I kind of similar...
I had remembered it being
it.
Like one of my favorite ones, but it goes really close to the top. I mean, I watched it all the way through, and then I watched it with the commentary just to hear what the hell this guy was thinking. It's another one of those kind of self-referential.
And as I remember,
it's one of the first ones.
Writer-director.
Yes.
Same guy wrote it, directed it, so it was a real...
Can't remember his name, like McLaughlin, something like that. But he was a really intelligent director, and I kind of want to look more into what he has done or where he started or not. But he definitely had a unique vision for that movie. It's the first one where Jason is actually something more than just a human being.
Yep. I always think of...
revived like Frankenstein.
Yeah, I always think of Friday the 13th Part 6 as the completion of, really, Jason's origin. Because unlike Freddy, the Jason Voorhees character was not fully formed. Famously, he is not the killer, spoiler alert, in the first film. They bring him in the second film. He gets his hockey mask in the third film. But it really isn't until Part 6, Jason Lives, where they overtly resurrect him from the dead, where this is clearly a supernatural franchise from this point forward. He is an unstoppable killing machine in a way that he hadn't been before. So yeah,
there's so many little gothic touches to that movie too that you don't... It almost looks like it could be like Peter Jackson or something weird, where it has this really weird sense of humor and they're dealing with really tough issues. One of them, like... Do you remember the scene in that one where he invades the camp? With the little kids.
Yeah, it's also one of the only movies where there's actually children attending Camp Crystal Lake.
They talk about that too. It's like, we're going to try to introduce little kids and see where that goes. You add a new element of...
Yeah. And that element would be revisited.
There's a scene where he like breaks down the door and there's the leaves are flying everywhere and the kids are like screaming at the top of their lungs because he... I don't know, it's a great moment where he's invading the camp and you see little kids... You don't know if maybe they're like dreaming this. You see his shadow like walk by the window of the camp, the building of the camp where they're all sleeping. And something really creepy about that. And I don't know, it had so much going for it. There's such a weird sense of humor about itself. It doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say about the movie. It's like it doesn't take itself so serious. It's kind of a fun... It's kind of like they, tried to kill the character off in Part 4. They try to do something completely different in Part 5, and Part 6 was like, okay, we're just going to give Jason fans what they want to see. You know what I mean? So it had a sense of just kind of like...
Remember the scene where the camper's on fire and he's standing on top of it too? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. There's so many things that stood out to me. And
great movie.
The last act is really great too, where he's in the boat trying to sink Jason, get the rope, get the chain around his neck.
It's a good story.
The whole thing, like all the way through, is really strong.
Yep. That's how I feel about Nightmare 3. It's also got that, and going back to Nightmare, it's got that iconic image of like Freddy as a like snake-like creature like devouring that girl at that one point. I mean, I've seen that on a lot of like foreign posters for the movie. So yeah, I think both of those are. I think we're both right. I think in the Nightmare series, Part 3 is the best, and you're probably right that is the best sequel in Friday the 13th, so I totally agree. My runner-up was Friday the 13th... wait, what is it? Jason Goes to... I'm looking at a different note, but I'm remembering what I said. Jason Goes to Hell... oh, yeah, I had 2 runner-ups. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, which
really good one.
I've always liked this movie, and I understand why it is not everyone's favorite. I get it. It's completely different than other Jason movies. It completely stands on its own, but just as a horror movie, it is goddamn fantastic. It is the goriest movie. It's a cool story. Forget that it doesn't have anything to do with anything that's been set up before. It's just a cool story in and of itself. Best looking Jason, as I've already talked about in that movie. I love Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I love everything about this movie. It's absolutely fantastic.
It has a really great intro, too.
Oh, yes. The opening sequence is awesome in that movie. Totally awesome. And it was the first of
I do remember, like, that one being very gory. We already talked about the
sex
scene.
I forgot about how gory it was.
And I also remember there's a scene where the guy eats the person's heart at the beginning. Yeah, he eats
Jason's heart, and it just, like, spurts this, like, black liquid. It's just... If you like gore, you gotta go back and check out this movie again. It's really good. And, yeah, it's just terrific. I mean, there's so much I could say about Jason Goes to Hell. It's the first of the New Line Friday the 13th movies. So Paramount had done the first 8, and then New Line got them, and everyone got excited that they'd cross more with Freddy, which they eventually did.
Freddy's arm appears.
Yep, Freddy's arm appears at the very end.
Something.
And
throw the fans a bone at some point.
Not just this movie especially, but all of the New Line Friday movies I really like. They're more kind of self-referential.
They look better.
They look better.
This is another thing I remember.
Yeah.
Jason Goes to Hell.
I mean,
light years.
In a way, I consider the Paramount, the first 8, like the real franchise, and then the New Line stuff is always a little kind of self-referential. It's weird stuff like, you know, Jason X and Outer Space and all this kind of stuff. But they're just really entertaining movies. So I really like all the New Line stuff, and Jason Goes to Hell, which was intended to be the final chapter, was a great way to kick that off. I'll be talking about that movie more in further categories, so I guess I won't say anything else about it now. I also chose Wes Craven's New Nightmare as best sequel. What a wonderfully inventive way to go. And kind of like Jason Goes to Hell, I suspect, you know, if you like the traditional Nightmare on Elm Street movie, you might not like this one.
Another prototype for Scream. You could tell,
way ahead of its time.
You could tell Wes Craven had this little seed of an idea for kind of a referential horror movie.
Way ahead of its time.
He didn't quite get it right till Scream, but he used all those elements.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, watching so many of these movies in a row, it's refreshing to come across one that has a new idea. So this is almost not even a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It's more a movie about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Wes Craven appears in the movie as himself. Heather Langenkamp
like
appears
Cat
as
in the
herself.
Brain.
Well, it's much better than Cat in the Brain.
No, not I'm talking about like idea-wise.
No, it is that kind of thing. It's about, you know, Wes Craven's a very intellectual filmmaker. That's always been part of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. But in this one, it's very postmodern. You know, they talk about Freddy as a character in the movies. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the presence of mind to summarize this movie at this point. But it's a really, really unique, interesting take, and it's a good horror movie. I think, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street fans, some people probably like it, some people probably don't like it, but just as a movie, it's really good and it's really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And I think you could watch like A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors, then skip ahead to Wes Craven's Nightmare, and give yourself a nice little Wes Craven trilogy, and that's kind of all you really need to watch for A Nightmare on Elm Street.
I agree.
So, okay,
all 3 are very good.
On and on.
Kind of cheated.
Well, my choice, you know, is Part 3, but I had some runners-up. So
all right, let's go on.
This is too much good. We gotta. Oh my god, this is gonna be like an epic episode. We really gotta motor through this. This might be a 2-parter. We'll see how this goes. Okay, quick. Worst sequel. What did you choose?
Freddy's Dead.
Pretty bad. Pretty disappointing. Meant to be an epic conclusion to the series, but
yes.
Okay. Anything in particular you want to say about it?
Not really.
So it's kind of lousy.
There's really, yeah. Basically, that's kind of how I arrived at that. I'm like, what one just doesn't make an impact at all, and that one is just so yeah, it's bad. It's the worst. So.
Yep, especially when you compare it to Jason Goes to Hell, which is kind of the equivalent in the Friday the 13th.
And it's also like whiplash to watch the first Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and then go to the second one and be like, what the hell? They already got this formula wrong. It's the second one, but all right.
So wait, what are you choosing for the worst? Are you choosing
Freddy's Dead, the second one? Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
Oh,
not Freddy's Dead. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
Freddy's Revenge.
Freddy's Revenge.
Oh, yeah.
That's mine.
I thought you meant Freddy's Dead, which I don't think is very good either. Yes.
That one also is not very good.
Yes. But, Part 2 is terrible.
Okay, yes. I'm going with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
Okay.
You know which one that one is.
That's a bad one. It's got this weird, like, homoerotic / homophobic...
Totally unnecessary... something going on there.
Yeah, so. they really tried something different. So
that's
nice.
I kind of went with a knee-jerk first instinct reaction.
And I did the same for the other franchise, though, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, where they have essentially a fake Jason. They had killed him off.
Yep, and that's one that I thought of as well. But
yeah, they killed him off in Part 4, and in an attempt to revive the franchise before they came up with the idea of just bringing him back from the dead.
They made Corey Feldman's character into the... hero / killer.
Yeah, and not only is it disappointing, because there's no Jason Voorhees, it's just not a good movie. None of the characters are interesting.
The only reason I excluded that one is because I feel like it's kind of an attempt at trying something different.
But you could
say that. Work at all.
You could say that for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 as well.
Like, sort of. I mean, okay, yeah.
So both of those are bad. And by the way, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is my runner-up for that category. Moving on.
Oh, really? Yeah. Pick that one too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think those are easily the weakest entries in each series. Okay, the next one is kind of a fun category, I think. And we touched on this a little bit. The best final, but not really final chapter. Because, as we know, each of these series attempted to wrap it up and end it, but we horror fans demanded more, and the studios demanded more money, so the franchise came back. Friday actually has a couple. People probably know my answer for this.
I know Jason has a couple.
Jason has a couple, yeah. So people probably know my answer for this because I've talked about it ad nauseum already. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, a goddamn masterpiece. I guess I don't have too much more to say about it at this point. Mm-hmm. What was your choice for best final but not really final chapter?
I picked the same thing.
Yeah, great movie. Absolutely great movie.
The other ones are just kind of... There's 2 Jason movies where they use the word final in the title.
Yes.
So, that's ridiculous.
Well, but I did pick Friday the 13th.
I just picked it because it's the best film of those ones.
Yeah, and I did pick Friday the 13th.
Kind of simple for me.
I did pick Friday the 13th, the final chapter, as a runner-up in this category because I think even that is better than Freddy's Dead. So I actually... Part 4 is very good with the little kid Corey Feldman character.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's a good movie. So... Both of Jason's final chapters were quite good, but of course, we're happy that they were not actually the final chapters, and the franchise continued on beyond them. Freddy's Dead was rather disappointing. Okay, so let's move on to number 13, the best use of 3D or the best of the 2 3D films. Each of these movies has a 3D entry. What did you like the best?
What number are we on
now? This is number 13.
Best 3D one?
Yeah.
All right, there's only 2 3D movies, right?
Yeah, one in each franchise.
So, I went with Freddy's Dead, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just didn't... It's pretty forgettable, Freddy's Dead.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just went with they used the 3D a little better than...
it wasn't used throughout...
Its counterpart, Jason's...
It wasn't used throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. It was just in a very specific.
They have like a big moment at the end where he's getting burned alive. I think. Yeah, I don't know. I think they used that technology better than Part 3. It was almost Part 3 of Friday the 13th. It was almost like a requirement. There are parts where they're just holding things up against the camera. For no reason at all. This guy who has like a yo-yo that it just calls attention to it when it shouldn't.
Well, on that note, I am actually going to say that Friday the 13th Part 3 is my choice for the best in this category for the very reason that you didn't like it.
I get it.
I find the mugging for the 3D charming. In today, when pretty much every major movie from a studio is released in 3D, when it was a little bit more of a novelty back then, things like, hanging up the laundry and the pole is coming out of the screen, you know, and holding up the eyeball, you know.
Oh, that does have a good scene where he pops the guy.
Oh yeah,
and the eyeball
for
comes
sure.
out.
One of the best kills, I would say, too.
That's good.
Although, where was the blood in that scene? I thought that was kind of weak.
Blood comes and goes wherever it wants. Doesn't even have to come from injuries.
Yeah, I do have to point out too. I haven't actually seen either of these in 3D. So
I was going to say actually, no, you actually did see the.
Oh yeah, I did because you had
3D.
the 3D version with the glasses.
Yeah, I've never seen. I've seen Part 3 a lot. Friday the 13th Part 3. I've never seen it in 3D.
Well,
so that could be why I kind of have more reaction. Like, it just doesn't work.
Plus, I just like that movie better than
I guess.
Freddy's Dead. So
I kind of went with best use of the technology. I guess.
Yeah. I guess I found the cheesiness charming, as I often do. Okay, so the next one is kind of a fun character, kind of an interesting one. The best death of Freddy or Jason in the franchise. So not the best kill, but of course in almost the end of all these movies, they actually kill off Freddy They kill Freddy and Jason at the end of these movies, and they always come back for the next one. But which of those kills of the character was the best? I think it's my turn to go first. So I am going to go with, I think this was Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master, which is not as good as Part 3, but it was my favorite death of Freddy.
Master. I don't know if I revisited that
In this movie, Freddy at the end is torn apart from within by all of the souls of his victims. It's a really neat special effects sequence, and I thought a really cool idea. And if you really watch the Nightmare on Elm Street series, a lot of the deaths of Freddy are kind of lame. There's a lot of kind of mystic mumbo-jumbo.
That's what I was going to say, actually, is that... Freddy's deaths, I didn't quite remember as much.
Well, yeah. I mean, in the first one, it's literally like turn your back and don't believe in him kind of bullshit, you know? And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that kind of mystical mumbo jumbo that they make up as they go along. And you can include the souls, you know, destroying Freddy in that category. But it looked cool. It was a cool idea. Something of poetic justice.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Looked really great too, special effects wise. So that was. My choice. My runner-up is actually a sequence we discussed earlier, and it's actually the opening sequence of Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. How many times can I possibly mention that movie?
Where it's blown up?
Where Jason is blown up by the police. That opening sequence is so cool.
That whole sequence.
They take an iconic... You know, Friday the 13th sequence, Jason stalking a girl, staying alone in a cabin, but then they flip it, you find out this is actually a sting operation by the police. They unload, like, millions of bullets into Jason, then throw a grenade at him. I don't know why they bother with the bullets. Blow him up. His head is there, and this is the beginning of the movie. So you're like, where the hell are they going to go with it from here? So that's a really fun sequence. I really like that, too. What did you pick for the best death of Freddy or Jason?
Mine's going to be boring, though. I picked Jason Lives at the end.
That's good. That's a good sequence.
Dying in the boat. That's kind of why I picked it. The whole ending, the sequence, not just the death itself, which I kind of like. It might have been done before somewhere, but he has to be lured to the middle of Camp Crystal Lake by the main character, who's in a little rowboat. Or it's not a rowboat; it has a motor, which is the way Jason goes. So he gets a boulder, he ties a chain to it, and he has to get it around his neck, get it around Jason's neck, and sink him in the lake.
Yeah, which is supposedly the only way to kill him now that he's been revived.
Yeah, he has to go back to where he went. Whatever, and these mythos don't always make sense.
No.
So there's a lot going on in that simple little action scene.
I think that's a great choice.
The girl is trying to crawl back into the boat because they think Jason's sunk, but the lake turns out isn't that deep. Yeah. So he can still reach. So he's pulling her leg, he's pulling her down. She's hanging on the side of the boat, and the guy falls in the water as well. The lake's on fire, and eventually they get the motor of the boat going, and Jason's just hanging there, or I guess he's not hanging there, he's floating there. He's underwater, and then they turn the outboard motor into the back of his head, and then you just see like his legs shaking, and his head just goes pop, and he's dead. I thought that was a great ending to a great scene.
Beautifully described. I felt like I was there in that description. Yeah, that's an excellent choice. Great death of Jason Voorhees, but fortunately for horror fans everywhere, it didn't take.
Try again.
Yep. All right, we really got to motor through some of these, otherwise this.
All right, the next one we'll just go through.
Yeah. So this is like lightning round for a little bit. Next couple categories. The best origin. Mm-hmm. You go first.
Freddy.
I also chose Freddy Krueger.
It's a little bit of a cheat because it comes in later. They didn't start out with this idea.
Well, no, they did. There's a twist to the origin later, but I mean, in the first film,
I like the twist.
Okay, you specifically like what they added onto it later.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even without that,
I mean, I like both.
Even without that, very quickly, child murderer, convicted or arrested, but let go on a technicality, burned by the parents of the town, comes back to haunt the children of the parents in his dreams. It has the sound of an urban legend that you actually would have heard that Wes Craven came up with. Perfect, brilliant. They shouldn't have messed with it in the remake. So that's all we have to say about that. Jason's got a good origin too, but it's fairly typical.
I forget which one they add on to that.
The masterful part 3, Dream Warriors. One of the great things. So
okay, so they add on to it.
Do you want to talk about that in the later category?
Which one?
The mother category?
Oh, no, actually.
Okay, we'll talk.
I don't.
All right, talk about it now then.
So, what's his mom's name?
I think it's Amanda Krueger.
Okay. Yeah, there's something weird going on with Amanda Krueger. You're not quite sure. But she was a nurse at a mental hospital.
Yep, she was a nun.
Or a nun.
Yeah, I think you might have been a nurse too, but a nun.
So she gets accidentally locked in. I forget if it's overnight.
Yes.
Or if it's for a few days.
Yeah, I think it might be over. I think it was like over Christmas break.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm laughing about this. Horrible.
She gets locked in this
sanitarium.
Accidentally, the sanitarium where I guess they have free range and they can all the insane, the 100 maniacs.
Yes.
Are in there,
and she
gets passed around.
Yep, a nun is raped by 100 maniacs, and the result of that.
He's the bastard son of 100 maniacs, which is like the best line to sum up.
Yes, and I agree. As impressive as the original origin of Freddy is, it's so cool that Wes Craven was able to come up with that, kind of adding another level to it, which also has that kind of urban legend quality to it. You're really slowing on my lightning round here, there. All right, so Freddy.
I love that line.
Freddy has the best origin. We can go real quick through this next one because we touched on it just now. For our Mother of the Year award, each of these killers have a very important mother who's very important in their lives.
They both had mother issues.
Yeah, but I guess you chose for this category.
Yeah, I went with Mrs. Voorhees.
You gotta go with Mrs. Voorhees. I mean, she was the killer in Friday the 13th.
Not just because of that, though. I don't know. I feel like her character kind of follows through. I mean, it's part of Jason. What motivates him in almost every single one.
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean,
it's really the only character trait that Jason has. Jason's basically just a machine to kill people. Yes. But, you put on the mom's sweater, kind of arrange your hair while looking at her. Yeah. You might be able to survive a little bit longer than some of the other victims. So, yeah, for sure.
It's kind of part of him. So.
Mad props to Pamela Voorhees.
And I couldn't remember the name of Amanda Krueger. So.
There you go. It's a win-win. I just put Mrs. Voorhees for that one.
But I put that too.
Pamela is her first name. Okay. Best initial entry in the series is our next pick.
This is a huge topic, though, but we'll just
It is a huge topic, but for me it was actually pretty obvious, I thought, and I chose A Nightmare on Elm Street. Of all these movies, a lot of which are really fun, some of which are great, I think A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the few kind of classic films. Yeah. It's really excellently done.
This is one where we can go through, too, because I picked the same thing. I felt like it was just kind of an obvious answer.
It's a great movie, and by contrast...
It's kind of better on all levels.
It is, and as much as we love Friday the 13th, and as much as I love the original Friday the 13th film, it must be said, it is basically just a gorier ripoff of Halloween, as many slashers in the 1980s were. So, you gotta give props to just the creativity of Wes Craven in his best movie, in my opinion, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Enough said. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here, so we can kind of talk about these a little bit more if we want to. Next is the best... for me, this was an easy one, too. The best final scare or ending to the movie. So a lot of these movies have a final jump scare. And for that, in the way that, Nightmare on Elm Street is an iconic classic film, I chose Friday the 13th, the original, when the young Jason jumps out of the water and grabs the girl. Completely WTF moment out of nowhere. But in my opinion, one of the classic horror scenes, classic final scares of all time. It's just absolutely terrific.
I picked when it turned out to be the dog at the end of Jason Takes Manhattan.
No,
I didn't. No, I picked the same one that you did, actually.
Yeah.
It's too iconic.
Not that mention. Little boy Jason coming out of the water at the end of the first Friday the 13th. I actually had a wonderful experience of being able to watch this movie with a friend of mine who's not really a horror fan.
That's cool.
Who had not seen it and actually did not know, they didn't know who the killer was in the movie. They didn't know that this was going to happen at the end, and totally.
Even if you do know who the killer is, it still doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But she was actually.
It's not like that scene happens and you're gonna be like, oh, of course, he was under the water.
It all
the whole
makes
time.
sense
You can
now.
jump out.
And but it's just
it works.
Just an absolutely great moment. So. Okay, we just have 2 more categories. If anyone is still watching us at this point, we appreciate you sticking with us. But if ever there was a subject worthy of an supersized episode of Brain Says Strange Things, it is Freddy versus Jason. And the next category is about the film Freddy versus Jason. Best performance in Freddy versus Jason, meaning who of the 2 characters came off best in this movie, who was utilized the best. What did you think?
You know what? I'm not sure what I had in mind because I put Freddy.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to change my answer. I'm going to say Jason.
Okay.
Just because it's the way that they came across, I guess, is how you sum it up. And I didn't think about that, but Freddy is made way too silly in that movie. I think I originally put it because he kind of just had more of a personality, and there's nothing there to project onto Jason. He's just
Jason
non-existent.
Jason is barely a character. He's really kind of a force of nature, where Freddy has a full personality and motivation and origin.
But in the I'm thinking specifically about the final fight scene where they're fighting each other. I think Freddy comes across as just kind of goofy, and I know he's supposed to be goofy, of course, but I don't know. I wasn't rooting for him at that point. At that point,
it's interesting.
I was kind of like,
it's interesting.
Go Jason.
Well, it's interesting in that movie because you're kind of supposed to be Go Jason at this point in that movie because of the plot. Jason is really almost a good guy at that point. You know what I mean? Because he's still bad. He's still going to murder people if given the chance. But you want him to defeat Freddy. He's the lesser of 2 evils. Right? Exactly. But I think we had kind of the same take on the movie. But I actually chose Freddy as the best character in that, just because he is more of a character, and Jason, as much as I love him, is just kind of a force of nature. I mean, that's kind of what's great about him in his own franchise. But when you put them both in the same movie, and they're an odd fit to both be in the same movie as much.
See, that's why my first reaction was Freddy, because I felt almost like that was obvious. He just stands out.
Well, and
that's not always necessarily.
And one other thing I like about Freddy vs. Jason, and sidebar, great movie. I freaking love.
I liked it a lot better.
Freddy vs. Jason. I've seen it so many times. I love this movie. I think it's a masterpiece. But it was a better revival of the Freddy character, because we hadn't seen him on film for a while, than the remake. It was a cool way to reintroduce that character, a cool story. The kids in town had forgotten him. He needed to use this outside force, Jason, to start murdering people to stir up the legend so that he would be powerful enough to kill them again. And also the last performance by the wonderful Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool
to get Jason to fall asleep and fight Freddy in the dream world.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really great concept.
We could have a whole nother episode about Freddy vs. Jason. That movie is so well done. Some people don't like it, but I think it's awesome. I think they could not... I had another friend of mine, when I showed him the movie, he said, they could not have made a better movie called Freddy vs. Jason.
Yep.
They nailed it, in my opinion.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and you're right. And kind of they are respectful of fans of both franchises, because Freddy is clearly the more powerful one in the dream world. Jason comes out basically victorious in the actual world. Just a really terrific movie.
Here's if you think about it. I think I'm going to quote Joe Bob at some point, but you look at it on paper, and Jason's just like a mongoloid
in a hockey mask
person in a hockey mask, and he's fighting Freddy Krueger, who he can kill you in your dreams. You look at that on paper.
Joe Bob talks about that movie specifically.
No.
Oh, okay.
On one of the special features, well, he kind of does.
Kind of compares them.
No, the interview is from before the movie was actually made.
Okay, but
right after Freddy
rumored
versus
for decades,
Jason.
yeah.
Yeah, so he talks about the rumor. It must have been around the same time that New Line picked up.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about, like, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it was.
Well, they originally...
And he was talking about the idea of it. He's like, people have wanted to see it forever, but if you think about it, it's like...
It's a weird fit.
That's why I think the movie works so well.
Yes.
Because it takes that idea and actually, I think it works.
Yeah, it is an odd fit. It's something that fans had wanted to see for years. They originally wanted to do Part 7 in the Friday the 13th series as versus Freddy, actually, I found out. So it's something fans have wanted to see for years, but you're right, it's an odd fit, but that's why, to me, the movie is so impressive. The writers and directed by Ronnie Yu found a way to make it all work. It's a great entertainment.
Yeah, it's a good mix.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a great movie. We kind of went off on a tangent about that film, but it's worthy of some discussion. Oh my gosh, our final category is one that we probably aren't going to have too much enthusiasm for, and that
is a downer ending.
Yeah, it is kind of a downer ending. The best.
It should have been like. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Best remake or the least bad remake is maybe what we should call it.
I don't know.
But, well, yeah, and I actually chose Friday the 13th, and I actually don't think Friday the 13th, the 2009 remake, is bad at all. In fact, I would probably place it kind of somewhere in the middle of all the Friday the 13th movies. They do a fine job with it. It looks better than any of the previous films, at least the Paramount ones. I like some of the things that they did with Jason in this movie. He runs after his victims rather than just somehow magically being able to catch up with them.
He's kind of like Rambo.
Yeah, he's got some kind of... he's a bit more of a kind of like a hunter survivalist.
Got traps
kind of character, but
bells and whistles.
It's basically kind of the classic Jason. It could be a sequel. It didn't even really need to be considered a remake.
Yeah, they could have gone really far in that direction,
yeah.
But they kind of used just enough because there's a part where he even walks by like one of those archery boards. Because I was thinking like, oh, he's a hunter now. He's got a bow and arrow, but it's like they shoot bow and arrows in camp. Maybe like some of the little subtle touch. It's more subtle than you think it was.
It's not. It is not bad at all. I like it. The characters, the kids are really annoying. It's dumb.
The director's cut is pointlessly so.
The director's cut is... I don't even know if the theatrical cut is available, but if you can get your hands on it, that is the one to watch. It's got some problems. It's from Platinum Dunes, who do a lot of bad horror remakes, who also did Nightmare on Elm Street. But it's not a terrible Friday the 13th movie. I actually enjoy it. I've seen it multiple times. So that I thought was the best, and you obviously think that's the best.
I picked the same one. Yeah, I kind of knew we were going to pick the same thing. But something interesting that you said about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake when we were watching it is it wasn't as bad as I remember. It's not a good movie.
Yeah.
But they kind of just...
It really wears on you as it goes along, too.
Yeah. But part of the reason why I think it comes across as being just not anywhere near what it should have been is that the concept was so strong in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and the concept in the original Friday the 13th is a killer with a hockey.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of like we talked about the best.
It's like they reached way too high. The difference between what they came up with and what they were reaching for is way too big.
It's kind of like what we talked about the initial entries in the series. Nightmare on Elm Street is a masterpiece. Friday the 13th, looking just at the original films, is an above-average slasher. But it's not on the level of a Nightmare on Elm Street, you know? So they had less to ruin, really, with the remake of Jason.
Exactly, yeah.
It's like Joe Bob said, put a mongoloid in a hockey mask, put a machete in his hand, and you pretty much can't screw up a Friday the 13th movie. But
melted milk
A Nightmare on Elm Street, they really went into the origin story and messed with it in ways that were not satisfying. We've talked a little bit about it on previous episodes of Brain Says Strange Things. We watched both of those this afternoon. And clearly Friday the 13th is better. Nightmare on Elm Street, not so good. Neither of them are masterpieces, but I'll probably watch Friday the 13th again.
I would.
Perfectly serviceable Jason movie. Okay, so that is all of our categories.
What's the end result of all of this?
What was the point of spending 2 weeks watching nothing but Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street?
At this point,
movies?
I'm done for a while.
Yeah, I want to go at least a year before watching any of these again. But we love them, and I did. It was fun to watch them in sequence.
So let's just say
overall, what do you prefer, Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street as a franchise? As a whole, yeah.
Given one or the other, if I had to choose, I'm gonna go. I kind of wavered on this one.
We love them both,
but I'm gonna go Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna agree. What is your reasoning, thinking behind that? Just pure visceral enjoyment?
Yeah. I kind of like the idea that there's not a lot to Jason's character.
That is the key
and you
to
can
the Friday the 13th
do whatever
series.
you want with it. At some point, you're going to have to mention his mom. At some point, he's going to have to pick up a hockey mask. But from that point on, you can kind of do whatever. You can put him in outer space. That wasn't a good movie. But you can do stuff like that.
I like Jason X.
Which is weird because Nightmare on Elm Street is more of a surrealistic thing. But you're always tied to this really strong premise. But you're still kind of tied to it. With Friday the 13th, I feel like you can just kind of do anything, and I feel like they kind of probably succeeded more in doing that. Like, if you look at the original, and then you watch Jason Goes to Hell, I mean, those are, like, completely different movies.
And not to mention Jason X, Outer Space, and but you can do that with Jason because it's so basic. So that is what I like and ultimately prefer as a franchise about Friday the 13th, is that there's something very pure about it. It is just giving horror fans what they want to see. While 1979's Halloween, directed by the great John Carpenter, is the text for slashers, Friday the 13th is kind of set the tone for everything that would follow. It's kind of like the gorier version, and ultimately that proved to be hugely profitable for the studio. It was obviously what fans wanted, and that's what Friday the 13th is all about, just giving fans exactly what they want to see, whereas A Nightmare on Elm Street is a little bit more cerebral. So my kind of final take on that is that I think the original Nightmare on Elm Street is probably a better film than almost all the films in the Jason sequence, but as a franchise, I prefer Friday the 13th.
Yep. I couldn't have said any better. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay. Well, my kind of final question for you is, there are 20 movies amongst both of these franchises, 12 in the Friday the 13th series. What do you hope
What is wrong with you?
What is wrong? What has gone wrong with our lives that we're here discussing these movies that we're saying? No. What do you hope would be the future of either or both of these franchises, or have we had enough? I mean, I know right now you and I have had enough. We're on overdose, but going forward, do you think there's a future in these franchises?
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah.
They're always going to bring something back. I said when we were watching one of the remakes is the way they should. If I was a movie producer, the way I would do it is I'd put out an open casting call for directors. I guess that wouldn't be a casting call. Whatever. You put out that you're looking for new directors, and they each submit a sequence of Jason killing somebody. Like, that's your idea. Do whatever. You can put him in outer space. You can do whatever you want with that idea, and send it in, and we'll pick you, and you'll direct the new movie. We'll go with your concept. I know that would probably never really happen. It's too much of a gamble for studios. But I guess I don't really have an answer because I want someone else to come up with it.
Yep.
So,
but you would like to see both franchises continue?
Sure. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street are sort of like Star Trek. Like, there might not be anything currently in production, but it's such an iconic kind of part of really kind of American pop culture.
I mean, it's like modern day Frankenstein and Dracula.
It is.
They'll always make those movies.
Yes, they're very similar to the Universal movies.
That's why I don't think there's ever a question of will there be another Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
movie.
I think so too. I will say though, I would be more excited to see Friday the 13th continue than A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yep,
I do think A Nightmare on Elm Street kind of needs Robert Englund. And now that he's kind of done with that
character, needs Wes Craven too, and when you start removing some of those elements.
Yeah, I don't know that there's as much life left in that franchise. I'm sure it will continue. But I don't know that I'd be as excited to see a Nightmare on Elm Street go on. But Jason...
And it's kind of like right off the bat, Nightmare on Elm Street was just a great story.
Yeah.
Told really well.
Yeah, you can just kind of let it be. But Jason was kind of a ripoff of Halloween anyway.
And Jason's is a story in progress. He's constantly changing, and it's more interesting, I think, in that regard.
Yes. So I don't think Platinum Dudes is still really in the horror movie game, but hopefully somebody will pick up the Friday the 13th ball and run with it, and we'll eventually see another Friday the 13th movie. When we do, we'll be there to see it, and we'll be here to talk to you about it. And I think at long last, that wraps up this epic episode of Brain Says Strange Things, where we discuss two of the most iconic horror movie franchises. God bless you if you stuck with us this long. We shouldn't ask anything more of you at this point, but if you would like to give us your choices in the various categories we came up with in the comments, that would be really awesome. I think that would be a fun discussion to carry forward. I think I can't imagine that there's anything more to say about Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. Other than that, we love them. We love watching the movies and talking about them, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching and sticking with us. This one was a lot of fun. We'll be back soon to talk about something else horror related. Thanks for watching. Bye now.